to Gracie Meets. I bet you've all heard of the children's story, The Little Engine That Could, right? I do think you guys should know this by now, but trains can't actually talk like in that story. But we also think that trains can't actually drive themselves either. That's not exactly the case, though. We'll talk about that later on in this episode, but I'd like to welcome train conductor Jeff Harrison onto the show today. Why don't you tell the listeners about yourself?
I've worked for the BNSF Railroad for 15 years now, 14 of those years as an engineer, swapping back and forth between engineer and conductor. And prior to that, I was a crane operator in chemical plants and high-rise buildings in the Houston area.
If somebody walked up to you and asked about your job, how would you describe it?
How would I describe my job? It's a good question. I would say be prepared for the unexpected. Railroad is 24/7. Us road conductors, we don't have a schedule. When the phone rings, you go to work. You get a phone call in 2 hours to 3 hours, depending on the location. You're expected to be at work and prepared to do your job. Weather conditions play a big role in our job every day. Whether it's hot, whether it's raining, whether it's snowing, whatever the conditions are, we will still go to work. We'll still do our job. I would say be prepared for the unexpected always.
How long did it take for you to learn how to do this?
There are 2 training programs that you go through, one for a conductor and one for an engineer. The actual training program for a conductor is 13 weeks of classroom and field training. A lot of rules you have to learn. Our rule book is about 3.5 inches thick. Although we get to carry that rule book everywhere we go on an iPad, a lot of it you just have to know top of your head. The program that's 13 weeks, again, it consists of classroom and field training, and at the end of that 13 weeks, you have one test. That one test you score a 90% on, and that's it. If it's an 89, you've got to take it over. You get 2 chances. If you don't make it on the second try, which is 30 days later, you no longer work for the railroad. It's pretty straightforward on that.
Yeah, that seems a little difficult. You only get 2 chances.
As an engineer, you train for 6 months, and you go up to a college, Johnson County College in Overland Park, Kansas. It's pretty much the same thing, but you have to take 5 tests, and those 5 tests, again, you have to score 90% on, and you have 2 chances for its into your career.
Why do you think this job isn't normal or mainstream?
This job is definitely not normal or mainstream, mainly because of the hours you keep. Again, as I said earlier, it's constantly changing. We don't get to stop and take a break if it's raining outside or if it's too hot or too cold. We've got to keep moving freight. I mean, there's a lot of people that expect us to get their stuff to them, chemicals and products to them on time, and that's our goal, is to get it to them on time. So when you say mainstream, there is no such thing as a holiday. You work around holidays. Holidays don't work around you. Your birthday comes and goes, and you're at work. Your kid's birthday comes and goes, you're at work. Christmas, all the holidays. Sometimes you'll be blessed and get to go to those holidays, and sometimes you're going to be stuck in a hotel somewhere. Definitely not your mainstream job where you get to enjoy time at home. It's always go. Get to spend time with your family when you're home resting, and that's when you do it, and then you move on after that. Keep on working.
I keep going back to Sports Reporter episode where Julia talked about how whenever you're a sports reporter, it's always, you can't really count on whether or not you're going to be at someone's party or at a get-together because your schedule is always going somewhere or you have a game to go to. So I feel like this kind of connects with that.
I can see that. I didn't think about that, but yes, they spend a lot of holidays. Thanksgiving's a big sports day. I can see that.
If you could go back to the first day, what advice would you have given your younger self about this job?
Be more prepared mentally and listen to the older guys. The older guys have a lot of knowledge. When you start this job and you're a young person, you immediately think, oh, wow, I'm going to have a $150,000 a year job. And you go and spend a whole lot of money. and you go and buy new cars and new vehicles and new toys, all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, a year later, hey, business is slowing down. We're not going to need you for 6 months or 8 months. You're furloughed. And those bills still keep coming. Seen a lot of guys get in that kind of situation. The market is so volatile in moving freight. I mean, sometimes, you're working every day and sometimes you're working twice a week. So you have to be prepared for those times. And safety. You think when you first start, you know everything there is to know. You've been through training. That training doesn't prepare you for the old guy who tells you, hey, don't do this or you're going to get hurt. And then you turn around and, bruise yourself real good or knock yourself in the head with something because you didn't listen to what he said. So I would say listen to the old men. They might be old and crotchety and grumpy, but hey, you need to listen to them.
Yeah. It's like parents, but you're not related.
Yeah. I've did a lot of the not listening to parents too, so I can relate to that.
And I know you talked about how you never really get set days, like holidays, off. So how often does your job change?
I mean, are you talking about like a work schedule? There is no work schedule. It changes constantly. As far as the work itself, sometimes say like tonight when I go to work, I'll actually I think your dad's working tonight, but I'm not sure. But he's going to give me instructions on if I'm going to stop in Lacassine, Louisiana, and set out cars or pick up cars. And it may be an unscheduled set out. It may be a scheduled set out. He'll let me know exactly what I need to do. When you go to work, you never know what your day is going to consist of. Where you're going to stop and pick up cars, where you're going to stop and put out cars. If your train's going to come apart, and you're going to have to work on it. Unfortunately, there's accidents that happen out there too. It's just constantly changing. You've got to be prepared all the time for different changes. You've got to be prepared to handle different situations. Again, the weather change. I mean, sometimes our dispatchers tell us, hey, you've got to stop your train. You've had a washout. You've got to be prepared for just about anything that you can imagine that could happen to a vehicle on the road, an 18-wheeler driver. We have that same situation going on a larger scale because we're moving a lot heavier equipment. And even as far as sometimes we have auto accidents. Sometimes cars get in the way, people get in the way, and we have those kind of accidents. So when you're saying how often do you deal with change starts from the minute that you go on duty to the minute your shift ends. You have to be prepared for change of some sort.
Always surprises.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the topic of changes, what changes do you think will be made in the next 5 years for your job?
A lot. There's a lot of changes. There's a lot of automation coming. As a matter of fact, we have things now in place where the train actually is like an airplane. It does all its own work. It's got an autopilot on it. There's something called positive train control, which makes sure that we don't make mistakes and pass a red signal, just like we have red signals and green signals and yellow signals, just like a car does. And it's on a bigger scale and a lot more dangerous scale. So they have this positive train control that if you're not stopping quick enough, it's going to stop. Trip Optimizer is our autopilot, and it slows down when we need it to. It speeds up when we need it to. It's a pretty smart device. So the changes that it's causing, though, are less manpower. In the future, there may not be conductors on long-haul trains. That may just be an engineer, because this positive train control and Trip Optimizer is basically doing the conductor's job, with the exception of setting out cars and picking up cars. And that may be something that there may be extra people at rail stations and sidings and stuff that they will pay to wait for us to bring those trains to them and let them do the work. So a lot of big changes coming in the future for the railroad.
That's interesting. I didn't know that they had things like that would stop your train for you and kind of autopilot it.
Trip Optimizer has been up and working, which that's your autopilot. It's been up and working for maybe 4 years now, and PTC maybe 3 years, which is the one that will stop you and not let you pass a red signal and make you slow down when you need to. It's a pretty neat thing to see on the screen when it's all up and working. You have computer screens now on your engines, and it's a pretty neat thing to watch it do its job.
And how early could someone start this job?
18. You can get a job at 18.
Well, that was pretty straightforward. 18.
Yes, ma'am. I actually know a young man who hired on the railroad when he was 19. But I don't know of any 18-year-olds that have been hired, but that's the requirement. You have to be 18.
Okay, and thank you for letting me interview you.
Not a problem.
I learned a lot about train conducting. I didn't know that trains had an autopilot feature or about how demanding this job is. Other than that, you can start this job straight out of high school. How awesome is that? This is the perfect job for someone not planning on attending college. There's only classes that you have to take and a few tests to hopefully get you in. No normal person could work strange hours or on a piece of machinery that can weigh from 4,000 to 20,000 tons. But then again, show me a normal teenager. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. If you like Gracie Meets, subscribe so you can listen every time a new episode is dropped. And follow Gracie Meets on Instagram at Gracie.Meets. Tune in next time for a very insightful interview with an attorney.